Just really quick, I wanted to remind y'all that the Games and Online Harassment Hotline is here for you, for your friends, and your colleagues. We provide emotional support to folks who make or play games, which is such a broad range of people. So, you might not need it today, but maybe you need it tomorrow. So we just want you to know about it. You can learn more at gameshotline.org.
These good girls ultimately change to meet the bad boy, which I don't feel like is the fantasy. I don't think the fantasy of the toxic masculinity guy is like, I want to be just as throwy as he is.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and we are back with a whole new season of feminist media criticism goodness. To give you a little sneak peek into this season, we're going to start with a couple of fun episodes, including our 200th episode. Then we're going to launch into our series of Hollywood Through the Decades, where we have an expert guest join us to talk about what's happening in Hollywood during each 10-year span. Before we get into all of that, however, I know we had a quick goodbye to our dearest co-host, Ebony Adams, on the last episode. And while she will no longer be joining us on every episode, she will be back with me for a few this season. And just like Carolyn, we'll rope her in throughout the year. In order to fill the giant Carolyn and Ebony-shaped void in my heart, I've recruited a very special co-host. You might remember Kat Spada from Feminist Frequency Radio episodes about the piano, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and Promising Young Woman. Like super easy breezy episodes. As I was writing that out, I was like, wow, we bring you on the heavy ones. But Kat is a writer and storyteller from Los Angeles, and I've been so impressed every time she's been on, not only because of your wealth of film knowledge, but the connections that you draw, the analysis you bring to the discussion. So I don't know why you're here or why you want to do this, but I'm so honored that you are doing this with us. So hi, welcome.
Hello. I love nothing more than being critical and loving media. So it seemed like a really fun thing to get to join you.
Your whole resume was your whole cover letter was like, I like to be critical and I like media. Boom.
Yeah. This is my current step on this journey from, doing the whole film school thing and learning all about critical analysis and not that much about actual filmmaking. That led me to working at studios and eventually working in a nonprofit on the media advocacy side of things. And it's just like, when I was working for studios, I didn't enjoy watching movies because it was just fully sausage factory vibes. And now I actually really enjoy being able to not just, trust me, I want to watch like a 3-hour documentary about an acid attack in Eastern Europe. I also want to watch like 8 hours of Marvel nonsense. And it's just really fun to be able to have the space to do that and, throw some lectures in here and there.
Yeah. I think you're the only one of us that has now hosted the show that actually went to film school. We've all just been talking out of, not that like makes anyone an expert, but my friends who go to film school who not like to make films, but mostly like philosophize, theorize about film, just like have such training in how to talk about like the metaphors and the way that film like influences society and all that stuff. And I love it. I love hearing about it.
The good thing, I went to a liberal arts college and I had a literature degree because it was one of the only majors I could choose where I wouldn't have to take econ, which I was going to fail. So I was like, okay, well, I like books. Let's do that. And then I did what you should always do, which is make a life choice based out of spite. And there was a really insufferable guy in the general friend group who would always claim that he could win every argument about film. And I was like, you know what? It's not that many more credits if I just add this major.
This is so good.
Yeah. And that way, if I have the major, then like ultimately I have to win every argument because I will be like, well, thanks for being a Philistine. Don't even know. But I'm actually a film major, so I can talk to you a little bit about like the Cahiers du Cinema or whatever. And so it was fully a spite-based decision. And here we are.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, and also you're not new to podcasting. You have a very long-running podcast of your own.
Yeah, I do like to think that the pandemic years kind of don't count in terms of any sort of metric, but started podcasting in 2014, I think. I was looking and I can't remember if we started recording in 2014 and didn't start releasing episodes until the beginning of 2015. But my friend
still,
yeah.
Semantics a little bit there.
I'm a middle schooler in the world of podcasting. So my friend Lizzie and I have been on a episode by episode journey through Beverly Hills 90210. And it's something that we bonded over when we first became friends, was how much we loved watching this show when we were kids. And by going back into it as adults, it's kind of similar where we're like, oh, wow, I always just thought he was cool when I was watching this when I was little. And now he's the worst character on all of television. And so it's been a lot of fun to go in and reminisce about the 90s, talk about what it is when you're watching TV and you're a kid and you're like, wow, when I'm 16, I might have a breast cancer scare, just like Brenda Walsh. Like, all of these ways that pop culture teaches us about ourselves. And that
wow, what a journey.
A real journey. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'm so excited for you to bring all of that here in this space, especially because we are about to, which was Ebony's fucking idea, and then was like, peace, I'm out. The whole Hollywood through the decades, which I'm actually really excited about. And I think this is a great time for you to slot in because you have all of this like wealth of knowledge to bring to the table and probably can think of good questions to ask guests where I'm just sitting here being like, wow, that's cool. So yeah, that'll be good. All right. I actually think that this week's topic is a perfect one you've been on the show before, but to kind of get us going on
I'm going to throw my weight around this time.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's be real. So we're doing an episode about toxic masculinity. And this morning I was like, man, I just got back from vacation and I'm totally brain dead and don't know anything. And I got like this huge email from Kat being like, here are 50 examples of different facets of masculinity. And I was like, oh my God, I love you. This was the best choice ever. So do you want to introduce this week's topic for everybody?
I sure do. So I was on the episode of Feminist Frequency Radio where we were talking about the piano, and all of us were kind of grappling with Harvey Keitel's performance in that movie. He was so gross, and yet it was this very appealing character and portrayal. So today we're talking about the seductive qualities of toxic masculinity on screen. What is it about male characters who possess the types of machismo and cis-heteronormative manliness that rankle our feminist sensibilities intellectually, but whom we find ourselves attracted to as audience members? Not just attracted romantically, like the legions of Jamie Fraser-obsessed Outlander fans that include me among their number, but as heroes in their own stories whose success we want to see realized against our own best judgment. Has the patriarchy conditioned what we find appealing? Yes. Does liking a fictional character, even if you would hate them IRL, make you a bad person? Probably not. Are we as audience members ready for the cuckification of the matinee idol? Maybe. That last part was a joke, but we're here to dive into all that and more in this week's episode.
Yes. All right. Right. And joining us for this conversation is Dave Proctor. Dave is the creative director, studio head, founder at Mighty Yell, who made The Big Con, available now on Steam.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's a game about it's in space of the 90s. It's a young girl who is trying to save her family's video store. It's a heist game. I'm doing a very bad job, but go buy it because it's
you got all the component parts of the pitch.
Yeah, I just didn't
which is all that matters.
Yeah, right there.
It's a game about a young woman con artist in the early mid 90s trying to save her family video store.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like an ad lib.
I love it.
I've been sitting here silently while Kat did the intro, and I too went to film school, a film school that is a theoretical, non-practical film school.
Yes.
So I would love to talk about Kaida cinema. Let's really ruin this show for everybody. I think it's a great idea.
I'll just leave the recording going and let you two do your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have like a drinking game for, the amount of simulacrum mentions and Baudrillard's
Hey,
hyperreal.
okay. I did a whole private independent study about postmodern theory, so I could jump in on this shit. I don't know about the film stuff, but I can do the Baudrillard shit.
I promise it will be more valuable than, and Dave, like, you'll know as soon as we have a conversation that I was just like, oh, I want to write an essay about Clueless. Can I do this in film school? Perfect.
Okay. So my final year, my final like term of film school, I got to do whatever I wanted. And I chose to write about American midlife crisis movies. So the sort of waning masculinity was always my my bread and butter in terms of how I thought about that. But yeah, the fun thing about film school was just like, yeah, how can I make this relate to, some crap that I grew up with? How can I like write an essay on postmodernism and like Harriet the Spy? What's the grift that I can pull off there? Yeah, so I'm with you.
It's a theme in your life.
It is.
So Dave is also one of Feminist Frequency's board members and does a lot of work with us around the work we're doing around masculinity, around accountability, around trying to end abuse in the games industry. And so I immediately thought of you when we had pitched this episode idea as someone who might have a lot to offer. I didn't even know you went to film school, so that's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
And you've been on the show before. You were on like a Christmas episode. I think I always forget that you've been on the show.
We did Happiest Season.
Oh, that was terrible. Oh, so fucking
and
bad.
I was there for People Under the Stairs and I think one other, but I don't remember. Probably just those two, actually.
Was I on the People Under the Stairs episode? Oh, I was. That was a weird movie.
That's a weird movie.
Yeah, super weird. All right. So here we go. Let's do this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Who wants to dive in? Where should we start?
Well, I'm curious, Dave, what did you think? I mean, until I, said the cuckification of the matinee idol, did you know that's what we were going to be talking about? What did you think we might talk about when you heard the seduction of toxic masculinity?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I was expecting, or I am expecting, or the cuckification. I now only want to talk about that word for the rest of my life.
I apologize, and also I don't apologize, but
that was the right response. What I think is interesting about this, or what I like talking about when we talk about toxic masculinity in film, is sort of the things that we let ourselves get away with a little bit, or the way that it is that allure. It is that thing where it's like, oh, I want to see someone do the bad thing. I'm very interested in watching, and like culturally and mythologically in general, I think it's very interesting to us to watch people break rules. And I think it's really interesting when those rules are maybe the ones that our feminist sides follow, but society doesn't necessarily follow, right? So like we love watching a bad boy in an outlaw Western.
Right.
But I wonder if it's the same sort of mechanisms at work where we like watching people do the things that we know to be, I don't know, shitty. Like I'm curious about, I don't have an answer. I just thought we could needle at that a bit.
For some reason, this isn't entirely about what's on screen, but the comedian and actor Rob Delaney said one time that, and he's someone I always think of as like a fairly macho guy, but who talks a lot about like toxic masculinity and not, and trying to dismantle that. And he said, it seems weird that the best tool I have to dismantle the patriarchy is to be a good father to my sons. And I always think of that as something like, I always wonder, like, why is it that I still am drawn to a lot of the same super popular media? I love war movies. I do love watching, an action hero, somebody who doesn't play by the rules and he's going to like do whatever it takes. And that I feel such a rush. I feel so much adrenaline from that. And it feels like that's something that obviously is propelling us, but why?
Last night I watched Batman Forever, the Val Kilmer, Joel Schumacher
just
directed.
now what the whole episode is going to be about. Please continue.
The movie is horrific. Like, it's not even fun to watch. It's so bad. I don't know if anyone remembers how bad it was. It was truly awful. But as you were talking about the bad boy, there's a line. So in the movie, Nicole Kidman plays a horrible psychiatrist, and she's in love with both Batman and Bruce Wayne. She doesn't know that they're the same person. And there's a line where she's like, I was attracted to, in high school, like the bad boy with the earring. And then she like goes through the decades of like what the bad boy represents. And eventually like Batman comes to her and she's like, I can't believe I'm saying no to you, but I found someone else. And there's just this really interesting moment related to kind of what we're talking about here of like Batman is the sort of bad boy, the allure, the toxic masculinity. And Bruce Wayne is supposed to be the not that, right? Like he's supposed to be the, you know, real human person that's not a mystery, but he's also toxic masculinity. So she's really just choosing between these two ends of the same spectrum. Or sorry, not two, like they are both on the same end of one spectrum, right?
Can I nerd out about Batman forever?
Yes.
Just 1 second?
Sure.
But like it pertains to the episode, like Batman, Bruce Wayne is such a toxic person. Like he carries his baggage and he uses it against everyone. Like that's his superpower, is burdening everyone with the stuff he hasn't dealt with. But Val Kilmer's Batman specifically, and I think it's the only Batman that does this, at the end of the film, he talks like very succinctly about how he has found a way to be like a healthy Bruce Wayne and Batman, to be one and the other. Like who is Batman without grief? Maybe he's an okay guy. So and you know, does Batman Forever actually create a Bruce Wayne that's an okay guy? I don't know. I haven't watched it in 20 years, but like I think if they did, and you're shaking your head, so if they did,
no, I was saying don't watch it. It's really bad.
But if they did, it would be like, hey, I am choosing not the violent thing. I am choosing this well-processed person.
I don't
It's just
agree
that
with
the
this.
movie didn't really do that. Okay.
And I just watched it.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair.
Do I win this argument? No.
I'm just trying to make the whole podcast.
Did you know that
Batman
you can
Forever.
win arguments about movies? There is definitely like winning and losing.
Yeah.
What a fucking asshole. Anyways,
It's a zero-sum game also.
for sure. But here I would argue that because like being both Batman and Bruce Wayne is not a repudiation of the grief, of the toxic masculinity, of the working on yourself. So the fact that he's like, I can coexist in these two bodies and these two identities doesn't mean that he's actually working or processing on any of it, right? He's just not living the very bad tension that the movie tries to create of like, it has to be one or the other. He's just becoming more complex, if you like. That's the most generous reading I can give of that.
Yeah.
Not that we should spend this whole time talking about Batman, but it is a actually really good example of some of this. Although I would go back a little bit to what you're saying, Kat, around like, I think that there's Batman is a very excessive example of this. That's like very clear cut. I think that there are more nuanced examples of how we look at characters who are stoic and break the rules and are right, but they're the underdogs in breaking the rules, right? And they're anti-authoritarian and they're this and that. And like, what does it mean for us to fantasize about being that person, being with that person, you know, whatever the relationship we might have to that. And as a fantasy and being like, fantasies are okay, but how does that affect our lives, right? How does that affect our understanding of masculinities and the limitations of them? And why do we not get more examples that should be equally as like hot? Like, how, like seeing a movie where two people communicate really fucking well, like, I don't know if it should be hot, but like I'm like, I find that extremely sexy in a relationship, but it's not conflict producing, which is what we want in film, right? We want some kind of conflict.
And
Can you think of one in a movie? Oh, sorry. Please, Kat, continue.
Well, there's something about, like, I didn't realize until I started making notes to think about this episode, how much of this, when we say seduction, like really is about attraction to these characters. And like, I'm not the most knowledgeable person about Batman, but like Batman and Bruce Wayne are both supposed to be romantic. Like there's romantic possibility with both characters to some extent, whereas like the villains in Batman are breaking all the rules, but those aren't characters that are ever seen in that way, right? Like when I think about the recent Joker movie, I mean, that's like the epitome of like this guy breaks all the rules, and then look how seductive that is in terms of like he gets a big following and people really want to rally behind that. But that is like that is a character that's kind of explicitly like desexualized, which, you know, that's why I'm like, just watch Taxi Driver again, like, and it'll get better, deeper into that in a better way. But yeah, like I feel, and I wonder, you know, there are probably genres of movies where you'll have cowboys or you'll have these like very masculine characters who are stoic and they maybe have a darkness in their past, but they aren't like romantic leads in some kind of way, or they're not like, they don't have a sex scene or anything like that. But then it kind of comes down, like maybe what we're getting at is like the male version of the Madonna whore complex. Like, you know, there's the Brandon and the Dylan in my 90210 language. Like there's the good boy that you want to take to meet your parents. And then there's the bad boy who ultimately is like the person you're most attracted to, but then they have like the problems why you wouldn't want to end up with them. I will actually tell you all that it's too oversimplified when we're talking about Dylan McKay from Beverly Hills 90210. And we can talk more about that later if you want. But like there's something, it is like, it seems like it only exists with characters that are supposed to be sexualized. So maybe that's kind of what we talk about with Madonna horror, right? Is like you have the bad girl and the good girl. And there's like a false narrative that those qualities can't exist in one person. So maybe we're uncovering this with male characters.
I like this angle. The interesting thing is that with Madonna Hort, you're supposed to be attracted to both.
Right.
But like with the Brandon and Dylan's not a great example because you're supposed to be attracted to both. But with like the, I don't know, big buff dude and then the not, you know, like the opposite of the bad boy.
Right.
The opposite of the bad boy is supposed to be laughed at.
Right.
In a lot of instances. Like I think look, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, so if it's got problematic stuff, we can knock it around. But like I'm thinking of Lloyd Dobler right now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so say anything.
Enormously problematic stuff.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I'm thinking about him as a person while we're talking about this. That character who is presented as this overtly romantic, not necessarily a rule breaker, kind of goes against John Mahoney's like dad figure a little bit. Like he's the opposite of the dad. So there is.
And we don't know
there.
that the dad is a rule breaker yet when we're falling for Lloyd Dobler. Yeah.
Yeah. So even that the dad is a rule breaker and Lloyd Dobler is even more law abiding. He's the one example I can think of in this instance where you're supposed to cheer for the good person, the quote unquote good guy. And like,
yeah,
I don't know. We're wrestling this here.
Yeah, totally. And it's been so long since I've seen that movie too, but I still feel like he's kind of a dick, right?
I don't know.
And he, like the stalker, like it's really hard for me to separate out the weird stalkery behavior and the like kind of like a little bit macho-y. Like there are the dudes that are like the jock dudes and the superhero dudes, and then there are the dudes who are like trying to be those dudes, but like can't quite be them yet, right?
Well, Lloyd Dobler, you know, he practices kickboxing in its early days, and I think he's like talks about maybe trying to make a career out of it. He is the bad choice for Diane Court, right? Like nobody would want her to end up with him because he's like doesn't have prospects, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like is he? I've seen this movie a lot. Is he? I feel like the bad boy of Say Anything is Joe that Lily Taylor sings her songs about. Like they're actually like aggressive to women guys. And then Lloyd is like he's the guy who kicks the broken glass out of the way so that she can like walk over it in her heels. Like, but yeah, then you watch that once you're over 25 and you're like, oh, yay.
I'm thinking about things like Full Hearts, Clear Minds.
Can't lose.
Friday
Night Lights. Like Riggins, right? Like we all had the hots for Riggins. Riggins is such a piece of shit. Like just through and through, right? But he's that like tortured, like I kind of want to be better, but I don't know how. And there's something that I feel like is attractive to the like the tortured, come fix me kind of thing, which is the thing that happens in real life, right? And I feel like that's part of this conversation. But what the other thing that's coming to my mind in this is Otis from Sex Education. And like Sex Education is, I think, a really trope breaking show. I think it does a lot with creating complex characters. And Otis is the star of that show and like is not at all a traditional male character. And that's kind of the shtick. And I think they do a really good job of making him still seem like a great, like, you know, they're all teen. I can't have any I can't speak to it as a young person because that's gross. But like, you know, I think that that is like a shift in filmmaking, television energy of making characters who are not this aggressive, stoic, tortured, or tortured in a different way, right? Like he's struggling with his mom and like talking about sex too much and just like, you know, wants to get the hot chick kind of thing, but not creepy.
He also like on the subject, he is definitely maybe a great example of like the lineage of this Lloyd Dobler idea, whereas like maybe some stuff in that movie hasn't aged well, but we see this also pale, dark-haired guy, and he on the subject of toxic masculinity has to deal with his own mistakes a lot. Like he screws up, he fucks up on a number of occasions, and he has to apologize. He has to own it.
Yeah.
And that's such a rare treat. Another reason I didn't realize why I love this character so much, but thank you for bringing that up. Like he makes a lot of mistakes and he does the toxic thing and he apologizes for it.
And there are consequences. Like Lloyd gets what he wants at the end of Say Anything or at the end of every drama. Like I think Matt Saracen from Friday Night Lights is the Lloyd Dobler, right? Like he's the good boy who takes care of his grandma.
Yeah.
Now, I like not to besmirch Asa Butterfield, but like he's not like the hunk of the show. Like that's maybe a little different, right? Like there are characters on that show who are athletic or who, you know, fit into a more like Hollywood traditional model. Like, would this show be different if it was like a CW show and they had some like ripped 28-year-old playing Otis, but he's exactly the same character?
But he couldn't be the same character.
Yeah, it wouldn't be believable.
It would be really weird.
It'd be like this guy works out too much to listen.
Yeah.
We've all been there, I think.
And I think that the heteronormativity is a huge part of this conversation, right? Like we are talking about hetero people and hetero types of attraction mostly in these spaces. But I think that this seduction also translate into queer relationships, right? So Bound just popped into my head because like that is a very queer movie where you have Gina Gershon being hot as fuck and like still embodying sort of gendered roles, right? In terms of like traditionally masculine, like stoic, quiet, you know, kind of like tough exterior. And that it still feels a little like stereotypically hetero, even though at the time it was still very rare to have like mainstream films with that kind of queer representation in them.
I know I've heard this phrase, and I don't know if she coined it, but there's a podcaster, and she's a host of the Waiting to Exhale podcast, and she's a USC professor, Karen Thompson. And I've heard her talk about the character that as a young lesbian, the male character on television that she would watch and love because she didn't know if she wanted to buff him or to be him. So that to buff or to be thing I think about a lot with this attraction. I mean, you know, certainly when you are drawn to these characters, there's a part of it that's like, oh, I wish I had that quality. Oh, I wish I could just be as carefree as him. Or I wish I was as attractive and that people flocked to me in that way. But then at the same time, you want to be with them. So I think that definitely informed probably a whole generation of people's gender expression too, when they got to I mean, you can look at some really like messy versions on like early The L Word, but at the kind of pop culture portrayal of like Shane, you know, the hot lesbian.
Oh, I know.
Who is like the ultimate kind of that James Dean tradition of bad boy for a lot of young queer people.
Yeah.
You had in your notes Moonlight, which is an interesting example. I mean, maybe just segueing off of like the queerness of how these stories present. I don't know. What were you saying in your write up about that?
Well, Moonlight really surprised me. I didn't know what to expect going into it. And I've only seen it a couple of times. I feel like if I watched it 5 more times, I'd have 5 more different experiences with it. But I remember Mahershala Ali's character as being this person who would be such an imposing figure in his world, but he shows such gentleness to the young character. I know they have kind of different names at different times in their life, so I don't want to mess it up. But they're then like how this young man grows up into an imitation of that, because he is using this very testosterone heavy masculinity to obscure his gentleness and to obscure his sexual identity. And like, I just thought that was kind of maybe the first time that I saw so well realized that knife's edge balance with gender that probably all of us are performing to some extent. And I think I've seen it in some women characters when it's like written or directed by a woman. They take the time to say like, you can be a mother and struggle with being a mother. You can be a woman who struggles with the traditional expectations of being a wife or of being promiscuous or whatever. But I feel like we don't often get to see that with men. The like, I have multiple versions of myself inside of me, and I have to choose one over the other for survival. Or perceived survival, you know, it doesn't even, I just felt like that movie gave us a lot of different portrayals of masculinity with 3 characters. And now I'm like desperate to watch it again.
Yeah, now I need to watch it again. What struck me about Moonlight was I think it plays off of this trope of like a hard life growing up and you know, like this thing that you expect about this kid's story from masculinity, from being raised around and around choices of violence and stuff like that. And I really feel like for me, when I watched it, it was about that up until the last second, when it was about like someone that wanted to be loved and to be loved by a man in a way that was romantic, that was soft, that was, and it like, not that it's hiding it overtly, but it is surprising in the way that at the end, you're just like, oh, he just wants to, this part of him, he just wants to have this part of him seen. And it's such a beautiful, you know, I always feel like it caught me off guard. And maybe that's me watching it as a man, right? Maybe it's me watching it as a man and going, okay, these are the stories of toughness. These are the stories of like what happens with aggression, what happens with violence and all this stuff. And then I'll see at the end that he is either going to leave that life or he is going to die. Like that's the story. Those are the 2 things that can kind of happen. And at the end, it was like, wouldn't it have been cool if someone hugged me? And I was just like, oh shit. It's like, you know, you watch an entire film and then it's like, I want you to think about that entire film again, but think about it in this context. And I think that's such a beautiful, powerful thing. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
I also thought about Moonlight because, and I think this is fairly common, like when you start listening, what are your 10 favorite movies from the 80s? Like probably the first ones that will come to mind are the most kind of popular. So I was thinking about, I wondered about this trope, like mostly white characters were coming to mind. Moonlight also, like, I think it's a shame that we can't explore like gentleness and affection in male characters, like straight male characters, or like maybe there just hasn't been space for that yet. But I also wanted to bring up, have either of you watched Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Well, no spoilers, and it's kind of hard to spoil because it's so complicated to get into.
Yeah.
But Ke Huy Quan plays a character who, like, this is the moment that really got me crying in the theater, where he talks about how his sensitivity is his strength, or his sweetness, his humor, his acting out of love instead of out of, like, his reactions are all love reactions instead of anger or other, unproductive emotions. And like, that is as much of a superpower as we're seeing with all the like 2 hours of kung fu that we've just watched. And I found that incredibly attractive. Like, there was this moment where you're not supposed to necessarily think of this character in that way. He's so passive for a lot of the movie. And then when that's revealed that is like what makes him so strong, I was like, oh my God. I'm like, where have you been all my life? Like, I thought it was so like wonderful to see that. And I hope that we'll see more explorations of that type of masculinity.
That made me tear up, you talking about it. So yeah, I feel like it's a bit underrepresented.
I feel like I can't comment on it without spoilers.
Yeah,
I appreciate
it's tough.
both of your restraint. I can take my headphones off for a second.
No, I'm not going to. I just have feelings about how that movie wrapped up a little bit. That complicates that for me a little bit more. But I don't disagree. I think that was really remarkable. And I don't know. This is a really basic thought, but as you were talking, I was thinking about like how, because you're talking about the complexity of the characters in Moonlight and how we don't get that in male characters or cis male characters typically, and how like some of the most popular, like widely popular movies, like the Marvel movies and Fast and the Furious and like John Wick and like just the ones that are what we would call kind of popcorn movies, are really, there is no complexity, right? Like it is that, and that's part of why sometimes we turn them on, because we want this sort of mindless whatever energy. And I don't know. I don't really have much to say other than like that. I think that that's an important observation about why those movies hit the way they hit, because they don't challenge anything. They don't challenge the viewer, and why, there are times when I'm too tired to watch a really thoughtful movie. Like I have to be in a mind space to be like, yes, I'm going to sit down and watch Moonlight. Like it's not something I turn on when I'm just like laying on the couch sick or whatever. But I think that those movies feign complexity for some people, maybe some people who don't think that deeply about gender roles and stuff like that. And so the fact that like Marvel is obsessed with trauma right now and is really bad at it, right? I think is that kind of like, well, you're tortured because, the world isn't what you thought it would be when you woke up 500 years later, or like, your dad was mean to you, or whatever the fuck the traumas are. But it's not deep, right? There's nothing actually deep about it. There's no real character development that's really happening, right? You're just like, yeah, cool weapons, bro.
You can punch your way out of the trauma. Like I think Marvel has presented a world where, be it trauma or any sort of adversity, you can man through it.
Right.
Using the same verbs.
Yeah. And I will say that I think the Loki character, like, and that's, there are characters like Loki characters in other media, right? It's not like exclusive to this, is a little bit of a play, like, because there is no lack of types of masculinity. I think that the argument that we're sort of making here is that like they're often all various levels of toxic, and therefore like what is our relationship to that, right? And so Loki is exact in contrast to his brother, who is like big, buff, whatever. And Loki has to be smart because he's not as physically hot. Although fucking, what's his face?
I think he's doing it.
I think he's nailing it. Yeah, I'm super fan. Like I was thinking when I was like looking through movies or thinking about movies, oh my God, it's one of my favorite movies and I'm totally forgetting the name of it. It's the vampire movie with him and Tilda Swinton.
Only Lovers Left
Yes.
Alive.
I've seen that movie like 500 times. It's one of my favorites. And like, and he's super hot. They're both super hot in it, but the attraction to him is that, for me, is that torture, just like, oh, the world is bad and I'm gonna hide away and I only have my lover and everything else is awful. And like, there is something seductive about the like the world is bad and we're gonna hide together kind of energy.
Isn't that also a bad boy?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But that,
he's also,
I don't think it's different.
Reckless,
it's just
right?
another example of this, right? Like, and we were talking before about all the trash TV that I watch, and like, like Lucifer is an awful show. It is like among the worst shows. And I watched the whole fucking thing in like a depressive, horror-filled nightmare. And like, it's
laughing out of identification with
yeah,
that.
oh, fully, totally. And like, I don't find any of it particularly sexy. I don't find any of it particularly interesting. I think it's really dumb, but it exists in that space of trying to fill that that seduction that we're talking about, right? Like, and it clearly worked if I kept watching it, even though the logical part of my brain is like, this is dumb, and if he sings one more time, I'm going to fucking gouge my eyeballs out. I don't know if anyone watched Lucifer, but yeah.
Well, I think
gonna now.
All of these like really popular franchisee things, they scratch the itch of like, they all have their own internal moral compass that like may or may not actually apply to the real world in any way. But in the Marvel movies, until like pretty recently, it's fairly like there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. And at the end of this, the good guy will win or be set up to win next time. In The Bachelor, like real world dating ethics don't apply to The Bachelor, but The Bachelor has its own rules about like what is appropriate to play with people's emotions or whatever. In Fast and the Furious, they're family, period. Like there's something about that where it's just like, well, they're mega international criminals who are probably causing tons of collateral damage and death, but it's all for family. So like there's this internal, and it's like, oh, well, we can kind of ameliorate anything that came before it. And I think it makes sense why that is it's the most facile way to like get your movie wrapped up. So it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, Anita, about I could fix him kind of thing, which I think that's definitely key to, play out if you played out any fantasy, right, about these characters, then like 5 seconds later, you're like, all right, well, which, does Batman or Nicole Kidman take out the trash? Well, I guess they don't because they have butlers. But, like when you actually try to think through to like the logical conclusion to any of these bad boys ending up in like being won by the girl or whatever, it doesn't make any sense. So that they have to change in order for them to be like a prospect.
Has the way that you have all watched movies changed as you've gotten older? In terms of that, because I have so much less patience for films where I'm like, you fucking said 2 words to each other. How are you in love? And then like at the end of the movie, you're like, this isn't ever going to work. Like, and it's exactly what you're talking about, where I think when I was younger and had less experience with relationships, I was like, okay, that's cute, whatever. And now I'm like, y'all go fuck yourselves. Like, this is not going to work. And I can't live in that fantasy, right? Like, it just doesn't scratch an itch for me anymore.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting while you're talking about the I can fix him thing, that I've like that has to be incredibly sexual. Like that, like I've never felt that but I have felt I wish I could act like that guy. Like there's that need to fix that almost is the like, no matter who they are, I can sort of domesticate this part, and I can bring this part into my life, and I can use, I'm making an assumption here, but I can use what I've got to sort of like bring that person into my life using the rules that we have. The rules are I can seduce you, I can domesticate, I can this kind of stuff. But yeah, I definitely have grown up in a way that the logics of romance, especially total side gripe, you say, let's go on a date at 7. I'm like, where? And then they don't say anything and they hang up.
I'll
But
have
like
a beer, please.
Yeah.
No, they
One
do
beer.
that. They do that in Norway.
You can just
Literally-
ask for a beer.
Yes. I
What?
was like, what kind of beer? Like, no, well, this is for bonus, but I'm telling you, there are places in the
And it
world
will
where
be.
this actually happens. Not the
Talk about
point.
non-specific beer ordering in the bonus, because I can go on about that.
Yeah, and I think some of the like you can fix or I can fix you energy also comes from which is a lot of these relationships is the you are the most important, you are so special that I will change for you. Right? That energy, that like fairy tale energy that comes in a lot of these films.
Well, and I think that's like, it's hard for me to answer your question about watching things differently as I got older, because when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with the impossible romance. So Roman Holiday was probably like my favorite romantic movie when I was a kid, and it can't work. It cannot be the fantasy that you want it to be. Or, Lord of the Rings, like an immortal elf and a mortal human. It could never work. But like now I'm thinking about like, I can fix him. The bad boy ends up usually changing the good girl. Isn't that how it works? Like at the end of Grease, it worked in Twilight. Bella has to become a vampire so she can stay with Edward. Like these good girls ultimately change to meet the bad boy, which I don't feel like is the fantasy. I don't think the fantasy of the toxic masculinity guy is like, I want to be just as bro-y as he is. Like,
Yeah, that's interesting.
So now, okay, so Roman Holiday is still like my favorite romance, and it is. I think it's beautiful, and I think it is impossible, and there's something difficult about that. And I did watch it in first year of film school, but so I think it is very implied in that film, where he teaches her to be a free spirit, for lack of a broader term, not that there is one. And like you don't see that act out at the very end, but it's very like it's the tension of that is incredibly heavy. And I wonder if that sort of, is that the broader appeal in general? Are we sort of like, okay, am I attracted to this person because they are who they are, despite these gosh darn social chains that we all drag around? Like, is it so appealing to me that this person will be an absolute asshole because they're not worried? Like, oh man, that guy really got his life together. He's just tipping poorly. Like who is this person, and is that part of the attraction?
And isn't that also the opposite of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I just watched Roman Holiday for the first time during the pandemic. And I didn't think about it in the way that you're describing it, but like, I feel like I don't know. I'd be really curious to see if that trend has changed or if that was kind of a unique thing or what that looks like. But the Manic Pixie is a lot more common today. What you're describing is not.
Yeah, it seems like it's like this alien visiting another planet. Like, whereas the Manic Pixie Dream Girl comes into our world being we're the guy whose world she comes into, like, and we know this world and it is what it is, and she comes in and operates to make his life better or magical, right?
Yeah.
I guess and maybe this is about like the world in which you have rules and social constraints, and then the world in which you don't. And so like this is all like just that little Venn diagram of one person showing up who can kind of exist in both worlds. Like there's Gregory Peck's character, but it's the whole world he lives in, she's in, that's brand new to her, where you can just go get an ice cream and cut your hair, and the photographer hippie guy with the Van Dyke, like this is all wild and crazy if you're a princess. And so it's not necessarily just that Gregory Peck's like the Manic Pixie Dream guy, but that she has entered a completely different alien environment, and she goes back to her planet, but still has all of the memories, I guess.
Yeah.
I've decided the term should be stoic hero jerk man.
Perfect.
One small artifact, and like the thing that I keep bringing it back to this, but I fell in love with when I was in school was this conversation of film as myth. And there's this essay by Jim Kitsis about how the Western is like the American myth, the mythology of we have established a society and sometimes bad things happen and we require an outsider to come in to fix the problem, but they cannot remain part of the society. And that is the trope of the Western, but it's the trope of a lot of things. And it's the trope of this same thing. I require to change something fundamentally in me. I require this person to come in and break all my rules, and then I will become different. But they can't stay here as they are. I can either sort of subsume them into my marriage, or I can kick them out forever. And you see that over and over and over again. It's very like, it is a very Campbellian like structure of how we think about this, but it is something that fits the story.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring up just such a fun movie. Have either of you seen Seven Brides for Seven Brothers? Oh,
No, but talk to about everything.
it is so delightful, and I think it is the ultimate in I could fix him times 7. And literally the premise is there are 7 mountain men, and they have been basically feral, living in a cabin off far even from the nearest small town. And the oldest brother goes into town to find himself a wife. And he finds himself a wife, and he brings her home, and she's like, "What did you get me into? I thought you were charming when you came to town, but you have 6 brothers who are all monsters." So they kidnap 6 more women, and they cause an avalanche to trap them in for the winter, so that when the families can finally get through, they'll be like, "These girls were stuck with us the entire winter. You really want them to go back? They're clearly like spoiled now, so they have to be our wives." And the entire it's a 50s movie musical. It was very low budget. The studio wanted to make Brigadoon as their big success that year. Russ Tamblyn is in it as one of the youngest brothers. And it is just about as much fun as you can have watching like an old Hollywood movie musical. But it is so goofy because the whole thing is just like the women would like to change the mountain men and turn them into gentlemen so that they can be tolerable to be around. And the men are like, well, if we just keep them here long enough, they'll just give in. They'll just decide they want to be married to us because what else are they going to do? So it's like a great, the great happy ending is how everyone just settles into whatever the lot has been given to them. And I think they refer to this Sabina women story from like the Bible, I think, in this like great song sung by Julie Newmar. It's like a whole thing about
I feel like we should do an episode about this wild movie.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, when we get to the 50s too, we can, I think it's from the 50s, we can also dig a little deeper into it. But
great.
I think that would be like a movie I would show preteen, like my preteen children. And I would be like, watch this and do nothing in it. Like
a roadmap to not follow.
Yeah. Or like watch this and be so horrified that your behavior like swings as far away from it as possible.
Nice. All right. I feel like we need to watch that movie now. Dave is like, I don't know. Yeah, right now.
Googling it.
Yeah. All right. We are going to take a little break. We'll be back with some freakouts. And I think maybe we'll keep rolling on this conversation about toxic masculinity in the bonus. Because I feel like there's like 10 more years of stuff to dive into this. So we'll be right back, y'all. Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you are, we would love you to support us to keep making it. If you become one of our patrons, not only are you going to do that and allow us to keep making this every week, but also you get access to some perks like bonus episodes, participate in polls to determine future episodes, access to our Discord server, which is only available to patrons, and, I don't know, other things. If you love us, help support us. You can do that at patreon.com/femfreak. Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Kat, what do you got?
I've been thrilled, moved, upset, and infuriated by the movie Aline. From the mind, from what would Joss Whedon say? Like, from the dangerously twisted mind of French comic actress Valérie Lemercier. Have you heard of this movie?
No.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Played it.
Dave lives in Canada, so I'm assuming that's a thing.
Yes.
Billboards everywhere.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I mean, that satisfies everything I think I know about Canada. It is a movie that pushes the boundaries of what we would even call a Romana clef. It is so bizarre.
What's that mean?
A Romana clef is like a novel about a real person, but where the name is changed.
Okay.
So this movie has the rights to some of Celine Dion's music, but does not use her name and tells the entire true story of Celine Dion's life. It starts with a title card that is like, the filmmakers were inspired by the life of Celine Dion, but some elements have been fictionalized. And by all accounts, like nothing in this movie has been fictionalized. But here's where we get to the real juiciness. Valérie Lemercier, who is either currently 57 years old or was when she made this movie, plays the character of Aline Dieu from the age of 5 onwards.
No.
Yes. It is like Hobbit technology.
Oh, God.
And it's almost like better when she's 5 because you're like, okay, like some kids are weird looking, like until they grow into their faces or whatever. But then for most of the movie, she's like either 12 or 17 and is the jowliest 12-year-old you've ever seen. And like Valérie Lemercier is a lovely looking woman, but it's just so she doesn't look like a teenager. She's 57 years old. So it does look very weird, very weird. The entire crux of the movie is about her great love story, which, as you may know, Celine Dion married her husband, René, who was her manager from the time she was 12 years old. So in this movie, there's a 57-year-old woman playing a 12-year-old who is meeting like a 40-something-year-old guy named Guy Claude. And it's like, is this disturbing? Like, is it less disturbing? Because I know that this woman is like in her late 50s, but it's extra disturbing because she looks like she's CGI'd to be like 12. So it is absolutely wild. By all accounts, the French consider this a serious drama, and it did win an award at Cannes. But to American audiences, it is just campy comedy. I can't wait to put the Blu-ray on my shelf next to Cats. Like, I would watch this movie again. And once you kind of get into it and you're like, okay, this is nonsense, but like, tell me the story of Celine Dion's life, then you can kind of just enjoy it. Because Celine Dion was super dorky. So she is super dorky. So the movie is plenty dorky and therefore like fun to kind of go along with this like gawky woman on stage in Vegas. I've told you all you need to know. You're either on board for this or not.
You had me at plays her from 5. I am in. Show me that nonsense.
Scenes where there's like clearly the back of a 5-year-old actress like walking towards a microphone, and then when you see the front of the actress, it is like a full adult woman's face. It's amazing.
That's great. Thank you.
I don't know what to do with this information. This sounds absolutely horrifying to me. Like, I want to see it, but I don't at the same time.
I mean, the great thing about LA is, when I went to a weekday matinee of it, there were like 5 other people in the theater to see this. So
It's amazing.
Incredible. It reminds me of this doesn't remind me of this at all, but Jessica Chastain plays Tammy Faye in The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and when she was asked like why now, because she's had the rights for so long, she's like, I am getting too old and I'm not going to be able to play the younger Tammy Faye for much longer, so we got to do this now. And I was like, wow, that's a great answer.
Great answer.
Yeah. All right, my freak out is not nearly this exciting, but I feel like we are in a renaissance of fucking great TV right now. Like, I feel like TV kind of like lulled for a minute there, and now it's just like, wow, like one thing after another. And so I have been traveling a bunch, and it's been nice to just like sit on my couch and just like catch up on my shows. I haven't done that in so long. So I just want to shout out Severance on Apple TV.
So good.
There's a little, if you were watching it week to week like I did, there's a little lull in the middle, but I think that now that it's all out, if you're watching the whole thing, you're not even going to notice that. Like, it's remarkable. And I like, shout out to Ben Stiller. I didn't really realize how like visionary of a director he was, because I had also just watched the Prison Break movie of the Prison Break show.
At Dannemora?
Yes. And while like it's not bad. It's fine. It's just not thematically something that I would be like, yes, you should watch this. It's still beautifully made. And Severance just like hit all of my like buttons for like soft sci-fi. There's no special effects. It's all like intellectual and visual, like, but not in it's just, the acting is phenomenal. It's really good. So highly recommend that. Also, shout out to Minx, which is on HBO. You might remember Rachel Lee Goldenberg from an episode we did about abortion. She's one of the creators of the show. Directed a bunch of the episodes, and it is about making a feminist porn magazine with naked men in the 70s. Which I was like, I don't know about all this, but it's really fun. I thought they do a really good job of it. And then the last one I want to shout out is also an HBO show, which is Winning Time. It's a show about the Lakers when Magic Johnson joins and Jerry Buss buys the team. It is created by Adam McKay and Adam McKay. I'm saying yes. Yeah. Sorry. And I like the visual style and like the storytelling style is just doing everything for me. Like I really like Adam McKay's directing style, and so the way that he integrates this like style that he's been working on for so long into this storytelling of this like, historical time period, I think is fucking wonderful. So I would give it a chance. Like, whether you care about sports or not, I still would give it a chance, because it's just really wonderful filmmaking, and like the performances of like these real people is really impressive. So great TV moment.
So good.
Right?
I'm excited to watch more of it. I'm really loving it.
Yeah. Dave, do you have a freak out?
Yeah. We keep joking about it, but I am currently freaking out that it is snowing immensely here in Toronto in April. And it always snows in April, but this year it snowed on April 1st, and I thought we were done, and it got me. Got me. So I gotta shovel my driveway, which makes no sense. But
you know what you could do?
Is it move to LA?
Yeah. Like the rest of us Canadians that were like, fuck this.
Yeah. I trust me, a couple more April snowfalls. If it starts snowing in June, I'm gonna ask you to start looking for a place for me.
Excellent.
No, I've been using Bandcamp a lot to buy music, which has been really great. Now that their app is like just a little bit better, and
that Epic money. What?
Yeah, all that. Well, it actually improved right before the Epic money came in, which I think was great. But I
mean, lots of people are worried about Epic ruining it, so I was kind of making a joke, but please continue.
Yeah, no, we can riff on that later too. But I get alerts from just a bunch of things that I've chosen to follow or have purchased stuff from, and I'm like, I grew up a punk, and I have Epitaph Records on there, and Epitaph Records announced a record, and they announced the record from the Linda Lindas, which was the group that made the rounds on Instagram and on social media for their tune "Racist Sexist Boy," and they were all, I want to say, 13 to 15, something like that.
Yeah.
And they performed at the LA Public Library.
And they performed at the LA Public Library.
Shout out to fucking public libraries.
It was so cool. And so I just saw the announcement that Epitaph signed them and that they released an album, and I just bought it immediately. And it's as much as like that video, scratched a real great Riot Girl itch for me. The album too hits this nice little like mid 2000s pop punk energy, and it just works. And it's really good. It is absolutely something I would have listened to when I was in high school, which is great because they're in high school and now I am purchasing their music. Like this beautiful circle remains unbroken. And there was a tune which, when what are you laughing at? Tune?
Yes.
No. I mean, the album is filled with tunes. I don't know what to say.
You're accurate. Yep. You're just old. It's okay.
Shout out to the track "Talking to Myself," which like the first couple lines of it, when I heard the few lines, and I was just like, "Yeah, hell yeah, that's really good." And I said in my car, "Hell yeah, Linda's," and then and I was sold. So that is my freak out for right now.
You had me at the mid 2000s pop punk because, and I've liked what I've heard of them so far, but when I saw the movie Turning Red, it reminded me so much of the 2002, like when I was still into the boy bands, but I was trying to get into the boys who wear eyeliner bands, and like that sweet spot.
Which is hilarious because I was like so like hardcore punk that I fucking hated like NoFX and Blink-182 and all of the eyeliner bands.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you're not punk enough. Like you're fucking sellouts, man. You're so stupid as teenagers.
The lyrics specifically that freak me out. When I talk to myself, I think about the things that no one ever talks about, like how life just keeps on giving. Despite all my bad decisions, I'm still here and I'm still living. And I was just like, yeah,
yeah,
that rules. Good lyric.
I love
that.
Yeah, it's working for me.
That's awesome.
It's funny thinking about like when I was a kid who didn't have any life experience, listening to music about life experience and be like, I get this. And now to think about like a 13-year-old who's like, quote unquote, made bad decisions, like, signed by Epitaph. And I'm like, girl.
Yeah. And I'm sitting going like, I have made bad decisions and life does keep give on giving. That's good.
Like every good young queer, I love Tori Amos. And she has a line in one of her songs that said, just because you can make me come doesn't make you Jesus. And I remember being like, fuck yeah. I literally never had sex before. Like I didn't know what that meant. But I was like, yeah, that's it. Got it. Cool.
That's all you need.
Shout out to teenagers, Like just live
they
your
get
best
it. They
life.
really get it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people
Always a
find
pleasure.
you?
You can find me on Twitter at blank Dave. I forgot my Twitter handle for a second, which is fine. I'm usually there complaining about how everybody's on Twitter complaining.
Great. And Kat, we're going to post some of your stuff in the show notes so our listeners can learn more about you and get to know you over the next couple of weeks.
Yay.
Yay. All right, our show is engineered by Rob Parrick. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Bye.